Single dad rescues two abandoned kids, then finds out their mom was a hidden billionaire. The snow had come early that year. It blanketed the forested mountains of Windmere Creek in a hush so complete that even the birds seemed to pause their songs. Caleb Archer gripped the steering wheel of his battered Jeep, tires crunching over the frozen dirt road as he made his way back from town. The sky was a cold steel gray, the kind of sky that warned of more storms to come. His thoughts were miles away, on the list of repairs waiting at home, the faded family photo tucked into his dashboard, and the silence that had settled over his cabin since the day his wife passed. Then he saw it, saunter away, a flash of red against the white landscape. Namanas. He hit the brakes, heart kicking hard. The Jeep skidded slightly before stopping. Caleb leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. It wasn't a fox. It wasn't a marker or flag. It was a mitten. Small, woolen, bright red, resting oddly still at the edge of the road like it had been placed there deliberately. He stepped out, boots crunching in the snow, breath curling in the frigid air. The cold bit through his jacket, but he barely noticed. Something in his gut, a firefighter's instinct, or maybe just the remnants of grief sharpened into awareness, told him this wasn't nothing. He moved closer. Just beyond the trees, tucked between two snow-covered boulders, was a little girl. No more than 7, wrapped in a thin jacket too small for the weather, her cheeks raw with windburn. She was sitting in the snow, legs pulled tight to her chest, clutching a gray stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. She didn't cry, she didn't flinch. Fersh! She just looked at him, ear-shoal. Caleb dropped to his knees in the snow. "Hey there," he said gently. "You hurt?" She shook her head slowly. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "My brother, he fell." Her small hand pointed behind her, deeper into the trees. Caleb turned and followed her gaze, and what he saw made his blood run cold. A boy, maybe 10, was lying on his side in the snow, his body still, his face pale against the white. Caleb moved fast. He didn't think, he just acted. And in that single choice, to stop, to step out, to care, everything began to change. For him, for them, forever. Caleb scooped the boy into his arms, wincing at how light he felt, like someone who hadn't had a full meal in days. The boy's skin was icy under Caleb's gloved hand, and his lips had started to turn a troubling shade of blue. Still breathing, but barely. "Come on, sweetheart," Caleb called to the girl as he hurried back toward the Jeep. "We need to get your brother warm." She followed silently, her boots crunching in the snow, the stuffed rabbit still clutched tight against her chest. Caleb opened the passenger door and helped her in, then gently laid the boy across the back seat, covering him with the emergency blanket he kept for hikers and lost hunters. The girl sat beside him, holding his hand like it was the only thing anchoring her to the world. Caleb slammed the driver's side door shut and turned the key. The engine sputtered, then died. "Come on," he muttered, trying again. The same. Dead. His gut twisted. He checked the dash. No power. A fuse, maybe? No time. He turned to the girl. "Do you know his name?" She looked at him. "Eli," she said softly. "He's my big brother." Caleb nodded. "I'm Caleb. We're gonna take care of him, okay?" She didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. Then, in the softest voice, she added, "Sometimes the wires under the glove box get loose. Mama used to fix it with a paper clip." Caleb blinked. "What?" She said, "If it smells like metal and clicks but doesn't start, the red wire might have slipped." For a second, he just stared at her. This little girl bundled in a torn jacket, calmly diagnosing his Jeep. Then, without a word, he popped open the panel under the dash. Sure enough, one red wire had wiggled loose from its contact point. He grabbed a spare hair tie from the console and twisted it tight. He turned the key again. The engine roared to life. He exhaled sharply. "You're something else, kid." She looked toward the back seat. "Eli's the brave one." Caleb put the Jeep in gear and peeled out, tires skimming the snow as he turned toward his cabin. It was a 30-minute drive down winding roads through the trees, and every second counted. As they drove, Caleb glanced at the girl again. She was staring straight ahead, her jaw set, eyes too old for her age. "What's your name?" he asked. She blinked once. "June." "June," he repeated. "Hang on, June." We're almost home? The cabin came into view just as dusk began to settle between the pines. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney. Caleb had left the fireplace burning that morning, and the porch light flickered against the encroaching dark, its amber glow swaying with the wind. He pulled the Jeep up close, parked, and rushed to open the front door. The air inside was warm, tinged with cedar and old leather. It wasn't much, a single-story timber frame, walls lined with books and handmade shelves, one bedroom, a living space with a pull-out cot, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of coffee and dust. But it was safe. And tonight, that mattered more than anything. Caleb returned to the vehicle and gently lifted Eli from the back seat. The boy didn't stir. June followed behind, silent, holding the rabbit like a fragile secret. Caleb laid Eli on the pull-out cot by the fire, covering him with quilts and checking his pulse. Weak but steady, he peeled off the boy's soaked shoes and tucked a warm compress near his chest. June hovered close, eyes fixed on her brother's face, lips pressed into a line. "He's okay," Caleb murmured. "You both are now." June said nothing. Caleb grabbed a can of soup, poured it into a pot, and set it on the stove. As it simmered, he found a flannel shirt for June and offered it wordlessly. She stared at it for a second, then nodded and slipped into the bathroom to change. He stirred the soup and glanced over his shoulder. Eli still hadn't moved, but his breathing had grown less ragged. Caleb exhaled and poured the soup into 2 bowls. When June returned, hair damp from the warm towel he'd left for her, she climbed into the chair at the small wooden table and stared into the steam. Caleb slid a bowl toward her. "You like chicken noodle?" he asked. She gave the faintest nod. They ate in silence. Outside, the wind whistled through the pine boughs. Inside, it was still, not empty, just waiting. After dinner, Caleb added another log to the fire and turned to June. "That was quick thinking. With the wire." She shrugged. "Mama taught me." He sat beside the cot, his voice softer now. "Where is your mama, June?" June stared into the flames. "Gone," she said finally. "She said, if anything happened, we should hide. Wait for someone who stops. Someone good." Caleb didn't speak. Couldn't, because somehow, in a way he didn't yet understand, this moment, this girl, had already begun to thaw something inside him that had long been frozen. And in that quiet cabin, beneath a flickering porch light and the weight of a snowy sky, something new took root. It wasn't just survival. It was the beginning of family. The fire burned low but steady, casting soft gold across the log walls and the sleeping boy's pale face. Caleb sat cross-legged on the rug, elbows on his knees, listening to the ticking of the old wall clock. June had curled up in the armchair beside the cot, wrapped in a blanket too large for her, her eyes fixed on her brother. She hadn't asked for toys or a phone or even what tomorrow would look like. She only asked once and softly, "Do you think he'll wake up?" Caleb nodded. "Yeah. Might take time, but he's strong." June looked back at Eli and whispered, "He always is." Caleb didn't ask what they had run from. Not yet. He had seen enough in her quiet, in the way she listened to every creak of the floorboard and flinched slightly at the sound of a car on gravel. Whatever haunted her, it had shaped her into something fierce and fragile all at once. Later that evening, just as Caleb returned from the kitchen with 2 mugs of warm milk, the cabin door creaked open behind him. He turned. His daughter, Nora, stood in the hallway, her hair a tousled mess of auburn curls, her oversized sweater trailing past her hands. She hadn't spoken a word in nearly 2 years, not since the accident. She merely watched the world now, standing at a distance from it. June turned too, meeting her eyes. And then, miraculously, June smiled. "Hi," she said gently. Nora didn't reply, but she didn't turn away either. Instead, she stepped forward, slow and hesitant, until she reached the edge of the rug. Caleb's heart thudded. He stayed still, barely breathing. June reached into her backpack and pulled out a small notepad and a stub of pencil. She tore a page, placed it on the floor between them, and offered the pencil. "You want to draw with me?" Nora hesitated, then sat down. No words, no noise, just pencil to paper, Side by side, Caleb stood frozen, mug still in hand, watching something unfold that felt holy. In that quiet, before the wind could rattle the windows again, his daughter, his silent girl, reached for connection. And a girl who had lost everything reached back. He exhaled, slowly, like someone letting go of years. He didn't say thank you, he didn't have to. June was already drawing a house with smoke curling from the chimney and 2 children holding hands under tall pine trees. And beside them, a man standing quietly, watching over them, keeping the fire alive. Not a hero, just someone who had stopped and stayed. The next morning, the sky over Windmere Creek was a pale silver, soft with low clouds and the hush of snowfall still clinging to the trees. Inside the cabin, warmth clung to the walls like breath. Eli was still asleep, his color better, the fever broken. June had stayed beside him most of the night, waking only when the smell of pancakes wafted from the kitchen. Caleb moved quietly as he cooked, flipping the last pancake onto a plate. Across the room, Nora sat on the rug, her coloring book open again. She wasn't speaking yet, but her eyes no longer looked through things. They looked at them. At people. June sat cross-legged nearby, not drawing for fun, but working. She had found a flattened cereal box and was now sketching lines and corners, shapes with purpose. Her tongue peeked out at the corner of her mouth in concentration, her pencil moving in slow, certain strokes. Caleb approached with a plate in hand. "What are you drawing?" June glanced up. "A house." He crouched beside her. It wasn't this cabin. It was bigger, older, twin staircases, chandeliers, a sunroom with floor-length windows. "This yours?" he asked softly. She nodded. "It's where we lived. Before." He studied the map. It wasn't just memory. It was preservation. Her hand was trying to hold onto something slipping away. "Why did you leave?" he asked. June didn't answer at first. Her pencil paused mid-curve. "They didn't like Mama," she said at last. "They said she didn't belong. But she did. She belonged with us." Caleb swallowed hard. "Who didn't like her?" June's jaw tightened. She didn't look at him. "They called themselves family." He leaned back slightly, not pushing, just holding space. June kept drawing. Then, in a whisper, she added, "Mama said never to say the name out loud. Not unless we were safe." Caleb nodded. "Okay." She paused, looked up, then whispered, "Arlington." The mailbox said, "Arlington." The name hit Caleb like a crack of thunder. Arlington was more than a name. It was a legacy, a local dynasty known for old money, political ties, and polished smiles with sharp edges. He'd heard whispers, scandals, secrets, but none of that mattered now. See, what mattered was the little girl beside him, drawing a memory as if it were a treasure map, a map leading away from everything she'd fled and toward the first place she dared to trust again. "You're really good at remembering, June," he said. "Mama called it a gift," she murmured. "But sometimes it's heavy." Caleb smiled softly and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Even heavy things can build strong people." For the first time, June leaned into his touch, not flinching, not bracing, just resting. And Caleb realized then, she wasn't just holding on to a past. She was daring, little by little, to build a future. How are you feeling about the story so far? I'd really love to know what you think. Did it touch your heart or maybe remind you of something from your own life? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And while you're at it, tell me, where in the world are you listening from? I'd love to see how far this story travels. That night, the wind swept through the trees like a lullaby spun from pine needles in memory. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled low, casting flickering shadows along the knotty wood walls. Caleb sat at the kitchen table with his old laptop open, its screen casting a faint glow on his tired face. He hadn't opened it in weeks. There hadn't been anything urgent, no emails worth answering. But now, something tugged at him. Arlington. He typed it slowly. Arlington Family Kansas Estate. Pages populated the screen. Old articles, donation galas, political endorsements. And then he saw it. Naomi Arlington, a former ballet dancer who disappeared from public life nearly 6 years ago. Rumors of illness, whispers of scandal, but no proof, no follow-up. One article featured a photo. Naomi in a forest green dress, standing between two children, June and Eli. Caleb froze. It was them. The same eyes. The same protective hand curved around each child's back, like a mother shielding them from the world. The article listed her death as unconfirmed. He closed the laptop and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. What kind of fear did it take for a woman to vanish so completely? What kind of danger had she faced alone, with only her children and a map in her daughter's mind? Footsteps padded softly into the kitchen. June appeared, wrapped in one of Nora's old blankets, the stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. She climbed silently into the chair across from him. Huh. Caleb didn't say anything. She did. "Are you gonna send us back?" The words hit like a hammer, quiet and devastating. Quack. He blinked. "What?" "To the Arlingtons," she said. "To their big house, their cold rooms, the rules." "No." His voice came quickly, steadier than he expected. "I wouldn't do that." June studied him. "Even if they come looking?" Caleb held her gaze. "Then we'll be ready." She relaxed, only slightly. After a pause, she asked, "Do you think Mama's still out there?" He hesitated. "I think your mama loved you enough to disappear so you'd be safe." June nodded, as if she'd already known. Then, from the hallway, Nora appeared. Her hair was messy with sleep. She walked slowly, not to Caleb, but to June. She held out a folded paper. "I drew this," she said. Caleb nearly dropped his coffee. It was the first time his daughter had spoken in 2 years. June unfolded the paper. It was a drawing of the three of them standing in front of the cabin under a sky full of stars. June looked at Nora. "Want to hang it up?" Nora nodded. Together, they walked to the fireplace and taped it above the mantel. A home. Not inherited, not bought, but built. One drawing, one step, one child at a time. And as Caleb stood watching them in the soft light of the fire, something settled in him, something he hadn't felt since the day the world broke: hope. The following morning, frost clung to the windows like lace. Caleb woke to the soft sounds of laughter, 2 voices, light and quick, weaving through the kitchen like music. He sat up slowly, unsure if it was a dream. Then he heard it again, June and Nora, talking, whispering, giggling, real, alive. He stepped into the kitchen, careful not to break the rhythm of it. June was sitting on the counter, swinging her legs and balancing a spoon on her nose. Nora stood beside her, trying to do the same, failing, then laughing harder every time. Caleb just stood there, watching. Nora looked at him, and for the second time in 2 days she spoke. "June says pancakes are magic." Caleb grinned. She's not wrong. That afternoon, as the sun melted the snow off the branches, Caleb stepped onto the porch with his phone in hand. He pulled a weathered slip of paper from his wallet. Marissa Hale, investigative journalist. The name had been circled in the corner of June's memory map. With a breath, he dialed. The phone rang once, twice, then, "This is Marissa." "Hi," Caleb said. "My name is Caleb Archer. I think you knew someone named Naomi Arlington." Silence. Then, slowly, "Is this about her children?" "Yes, June and Eli. I found them." Or, maybe, they found me. A long pause. Then, "Where are they?" "Safe. With me." Caleb told her everything, carefully, piece by piece, about the snow, the Jeep, the wire, the fire, the porch light, the drawings. The way June had reached out to Nora without saying a word. Marissa listened. When he finished, she said, "Naomi gave me a letter. Said I'd know when it was time to send it forward. I'll be on the next train." She arrived the next morning. Marissa wasn't what Caleb expected. She didn't wear power suits or heels, just jeans, hiking boots, and a canvas messenger bag slung across her chest. She had the eyes of someone who had seen too much and kept going anyway. June stood at the door when she arrived. Marissa's breath caught. "You're taller." "You're real," June whispered. Marissa knelt and pulled the girl into a fierce, silent hug. When she pulled back, she handed Caleb an envelope. "For you." Inside was a letter. "From Naomi. Pulled a girl, setted." Written in blue ink. Q. Rooped, slanted handwriting. The paper smelled faintly of lavender. "Q, if you're reading this, it means someone stopped. That someone was you. I may never know your name, but I know who you are. You're the one who saw Mitten and didn't keep driving. You're the one who turned back. You're the one who stayed. Thank you. You've already done more than I could ever repay. But if you have any room left in your heart, let them stay, let them be yours. Because I chose the road for them. But you are the place they were always meant to land. Naomi." Caleb read the letter twice, then a third time, and when he finally looked up, June was watching him. "Did she say anything about us?" she asked. He walked to her, knelt down, and held the letter in both hands. "She said, you were always hers. And now, if I'm willing, you can be mine too." June didn't speak. She just nodded, tucked her hand into his, and whispered, "Then I want to stay." And Caleb Archer, once a man made only of silence and firewood, knew he already belonged to them. The following week passed in slow, gentle rhythms. Firewood stacked, pancakes flipped, new routines settled into place like they'd always been there. The children moved through the cabin as if they'd been born under its beams. Nora was speaking in full sentences again. Eli, though still recovering, joined Caleb outside some mornings, offering shy insights on how to fix the old fence or repair the sagging shed door. But something shifted the morning the black sedan arrived. It didn't roar into the driveway. It slid, slow and deliberate, the way trouble often does when it thinks it's in control. Caleb stepped out onto the porch as it came to a stop. A man in a gray suit emerged. Clean lines. Polished shoes. The kind of confidence born not from kindness, but from knowing no one says no to you. Beside him was a younger woman in a long beige coat holding a tablet. "Mr. Archer," the man said, "we represent the Arlington estate." Caleb said nothing. "We're here to reclaim legal guardianship of June and Eli. I trust you understand the urgency." Inside, June had already heard. She stood frozen near the window, waffles pressed tightly to her chest. Eli, pale, placed a steady hand on her shoulder. But Caleb didn't flinch. Not anymore. "Reclaim?" he said. "They're not property. They're heirs," the woman replied flatly. "To a legacy." "They're children," Caleb growled. "To a mother who ran because she was trying to protect them from you." "This doesn't have to be hostile," the man replied. Marissa stepped out onto the porch behind Caleb, folder in hand. "Oh, but it should be. You don't get to smile your way into control." The man blinked, his lips twitching. "You don't have custody," the woman said. "Not yet," Marissa corrected. "But we've filed, and we have Naomi Arlington's notarized intent, along with signed statements, psychologist evaluations, and a girl who remembers everything." Inside, June stepped out from behind the screen door. Her small voice rose above the silence. "I want to stay." Everyone turned. She stood barefoot on the porch steps now, eyes locked on the man in the gray suit. "This is where we're safe." "And you don't get to take us," Eli added quietly, stepping beside her. The man's jaw twitched. "That's not your decision, son." Eli lifted his chin. "Then I guess we'll help the judge decide." The woman checked her tablet again. "We'll see you in court." They turned without another word, disappearing down the drive the same way they came. But the storm had already passed. Not with lightning, not with yelling. Just with the calm, unshakable voice of a little girl who finally believed someone would stand behind her. That night, Caleb fixed the porch light. Not because it was flickering, but because it wasn't anymore. And he wanted to make sure it never would again. The courtroom wasn't grand. No chandeliers, no carved oak benches like the kind in old movies. Just clean walls, a humming ceiling fan, and the quiet tension that settles before something important. Caleb sat at the long table beside Marissa. He wore his only blazer, the one from his wedding. It didn't quite fit the same, but it didn't need to. He wasn't there to impress, he was there to stay. Across from them sat the Arlington representatives, smooth suits, cold smiles, confidence sharpened like scalpels. They presented their case with sterile perfection: legacy, trust funds, private education, restoration of rightful guardianship. But none of it could touch what happened next. Marissa stood. Taka. Her voice didn't rise, it didn't need to. It carried weight because it carried truth. Taka. She told the story. Naomi's escape from control, the whispered threats, the hidden bruises that didn't show on skin, the fear that made a mother vanish, and the love that made her teach her daughter how to survive. She spoke of Eli's healing, Nora's first words after years of silence, June's drawings, the pancake mornings, the repaired fence, the porch light. Then she stepped back. The judge turned to the children. "Do you wish to speak?" Eli rose slowly but confidently. "We didn't have a home before." "Not really. Just rooms people walk through. This place, with Caleb, with Nora, it's the first time I ever felt like I wasn't in the way." Then June stood, so small in that big space. "I remember everything," she began. "The way Mama would whisper plans late at night. How she told us that someone good would stop, and when they did, that's where we'd be safe." She paused. "I don't want to be a name on a trust fund. I want to be someone's child. I want pancakes on Sunday, and Waffles the bear by my bed, and a porch that squeaks when it rains." She turned to Caleb. "And I want to stay with the man who stopped." The courtroom was silent. The judge's hands folded over a single sheet of paper. Then came the ruling. Permanent guardianship is hereby granted to Mr. Caleb Archer, with all accompanying legal rights and responsibilities, effective immediately. The gavel struck. Eli leaned into Marissa's shoulder, blinking fast. June turned and ran into Caleb's arms, Waffles flopping between them. Nora clapped quietly from the bench beside them, a drawing clutched in her hand, one of all four of them standing under the porch light, which glowed bright yellow above their heads. At the bottom, in crooked purple letters, "This is where the road ends, and home begins." That night, back at the cabin, the sky bloomed with stars. Caleb built a fire pit in the backyard, and they roasted marshmallows until their fingers were sticky and the laughter hurt their stomachs. Later, June tugged on his sleeve. "Can we go back?" He nodded. They climbed into the Jeep, drove down the winding road, and stopped at the same patch of earth where he'd first seen a flash of red in the snow. June stepped out and knelt, placing a folded square of fabric, the same red mitten, on the ground. Caleb stood beside her, saying nothing. After a while, she looked up at him. "I'm not leaving it behind," she whispered. He nodded. "I know. I'm just saying thank you." The wind picked up, gentle this time. The mitten fluttered once, then rested. And Caleb understood what Naomi had meant. Someone will stop. Someone good. Well, he looked down at June. "Makes Goss. You're safe now." She smiled, and for the first time it reached all the way to her eyes. They drove home in silence. But it wasn't empty. It was full. Full of promise, of roots, of beginnings. And as the porch light came into view, glowing steady in the dark, Caleb knew it had never really been broken. It had just been waiting for someone to stay. The days that followed were not perfect, but they were theirs. Eli found his rhythm helping Caleb repair the old chicken coop. He painted the boards a cheerful blue, hung up a crooked sign that read Egg Haven, and designed a feeding ramp out of scrap metal and crate wood. Caleb never said it, but watching Eli work, with his sleeves rolled up and tongue poking out in concentration, reminded him of himself at that age. Not that he'd ever had a coop, or a father who taught him how to build one, but maybe he was becoming that now. June took to the front porch as if it were a command post. She sketched every morning, usually before the sun rose, wrapped in one of Nora's hand-me-down sweaters, Waffles beside her like a second pair of eyes. She drew maps. Trees, people, feelings. One afternoon, Caleb peeked over her shoulder and found a picture of their dinner table. Mismatched chairs, crooked smiles, Eli laughing so hard his head was tilted back. Above the drawing, she had written, This is what enough looks like. Inside, Nora had bloomed. She talked now, quietly, but with more words each day. Her laughter came easier, her eyes brighter. She had even insisted on helping June with her comic, drawing silly versions of Waffles in every panel, calling it The Brave Bunny and the Porch Light Night. Caleb didn't understand all the plot lines, but he loved every page. And then there was Marissa, still here, not just for paperwork, not just for protection. She stayed after the hearing, moved into the spare room when Caleb offered it without really asking. She brewed strong coffee in the mornings, helped June with math, and sat with Caleb at night when the house had gone quiet and their shoulders no longer needed to brace against the past. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Caleb found her outside on the porch swing, sipping cider and staring at the stars. "You ever think," he asked, sitting beside her, "that maybe Naomi knew exactly what she was doing?" Marissa nodded. "I think she didn't run blindly. I think she ran toward this. She never even knew me. She didn't need to." They sat in silence for a while. Then Marissa said, "You know what I realized? The porch light stopped flickering the night after the kids arrived." Caleb smiled. "I know. I noticed. You ever think that maybe it stayed on because they stayed?" He looked at her. "No," he said softly. "I think it stayed on because we all did." She reached out, laced her fingers with his. The wind rustled the trees. The stars blinked overhead. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Caleb Archer wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Nah, min hispa." He was home. "Nah, min hispa." They all were. And home wasn't a house, or a deed, or a family name carved into marble. It was a porch light that no longer flickered. A kitchen filled with giggles and spilled pancake batter. A red mitten left in the snow, and the hand that had reached down to pick it up. It was staying, not just for a moment, but for good. Spring crept in slowly, like someone too polite to knock. The trees around Windmere Creek shed their frost and stretched into bloom. The path behind the cabin, once overgrown with snow and silence, now pulsed with green life. A pair of robins made a nest in the gutter above the porch, and every morning the kids gathered to watch the hatchlings chirp open-mouthed into the wind. One Saturday morning, Caleb stood at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching Eli and Nora chase each other through the wet grass. June sat nearby on the steps, drawing their joy, capturing movement with the kind of stillness only she understood. "Hey," Marissa said softly, stepping in behind him, her hair still damp from the shower. "You okay?" He didn't answer right away, just smiled. "Yeah," he said. "Better than okay." Later that afternoon, a small package arrived. No return address, no markings, just wrapped in brown paper with June's name written in looping handwriting. Caleb brought it inside and set it on the table. June unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a worn, leather-bound journal with a ribbon tucked between its pages. On the inside cover, in Naomi's handwriting, was a single line: "If you ever feel lost, write your way home." June blinked fast, but didn't cry. She closed the journal, hugged it to her chest, then looked up at Caleb. "She really planned it all, didn't she?" He nodded. "Every mile." June leaned into his side. "Then I guess we just have to keep living like she hoped we would." They spent the rest of the afternoon painting the chicken coop again, this time with polka dots and daisies. Caleb didn't ask questions, he just handed them more brushes. That evening, they all gathered on the porch. Marissa had baked a peach pie. Nora read aloud from her comic with June adding dramatic voices. Eli fixed the squeaky step that had bugged him for weeks. Caleb just sat with his arm around Marissa, watching, listening, letting it all land. As the sun dipped behind the trees and the first stars began to glow, June slipped away for a moment and returned with something small in her hands. A drawing. She handed it to Caleb. It showed their porch, glowing bright. The four of them sitting together, arms linked, Waffles perched proudly in the center. Above them, a phrase written in childlike block letters. "This is what it means to stay." Caleb stared at it, speechless. "You fixed the porch light," she said. "No," he replied. "It was never broken. It was just waiting for us." They stayed out until the fireflies rose, until the pie was gone, until the stars were fully overhead. And as the porch light cast its steady glow across the worn steps and laughter lingered in the air like perfume, Caleb finally understood. It had never been about the cabin, or the rescue, or even the stopping. It was about what came next, the choice to open the door, the courage to be claimed, the miracle of being the place someone runs to, not from. And that's what the light had been waiting for all along. Not perfection, not power, just love. The kind that stays. The morning of June's birthday arrived with birdsong and the scent of cinnamon. Caleb had been up since dawn, kneading dough with flour-streaked elbows and a grin that felt too big for his face. It was the first birthday June would spend in a place where she woke up knowing, absolutely, that she was wanted. She didn't ask for gifts. She didn't even mention the date. But Nora had remembered. She'd whispered it to Caleb 2 days earlier, after finding a penciled date in June's sketchbook beside a tiny doodle of a cake. So today, the house buzzed. Eli had made paper decorations, carefully looping strips of construction paper across the ceiling. Nora worked for hours on a handmade card, insisting that Waffles needed a birthday hat. And Marissa, in her signature calm, baked a lemon cake shaped like a house. Imperfect, slanted, but filled with layers and care. When June stepped into the kitchen and saw it all, streamers, balloons, sunlight streaming through the windows, she didn't speak. She just stood there, hand over her mouth, eyes wide, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and joy. "You remembered," she whispered. "We didn't forget," Caleb said. "We never will." They sang, they laughed, they lit candles. And after cake, Caleb pulled a small envelope from his pocket and handed it to her. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A certificate. He watched her expression shift as she read it, then looked up at him, trembling. "You're giving me your name?" "If you want it," he said. "No pressure. But I'm not your." "Yes, you are," Caleb said gently, kneeling to meet her eyes. "You don't have to share my blood to be my daughter. You just have to share my heart. And June, you've had that since the moment you pointed to your brother and said, 'Please help him.'" She clutched the paper, then lunged forward into his arms. Nora hugged them both. Eli quietly placed Waffles on June's head like a crown. Marissa stood watching, her hand pressed to her chest, blinking back tears. Not of grief. Of arrival. That night, as the fireflies lit the path behind the house and the wind danced through the leaves, June sat beneath the porch light with her journal. She opened to a fresh page and, for the first time, signed her name, June Archer, and just below it, in her own steady handwriting, "This is where my story begins." The porch light glowed steady above her, not flickering, not failing, just shining, like it had been waiting all along. If this story moved you, reminded you that healing is real, or renewed your belief in second chances, we invite you to subscribe to Healing Stories. Here, we share real-life journeys of strength, love, and hope, stories that speak straight to the soul. Thank you for being here. And always remember, no matter how far you fall, there's always a way back to the light. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know.